administration team to join us. Also, the deputations may also join us.
哇，使唔使帶個篋嚟啊？
佢唔知有冇改到，因為佢早排同我講就話，今日佢撞咗一個會。一陣出現咗邊個？
蘇生，好啦，請大家就座。
Please take your seats. As our schedule is pretty tight because we have to hand over the room by 4:30, we have to end our meeting by 4:30. So, as another meeting will be using this conference room, we have to end by 4:30. On behalf of the Bills Committee, I'd like to welcome you all to the Bills Committee meeting. This is the Bills Committee on Insurance Companies Amendment Bill 2014. You are invited to give us your views, and we also have the administration team with us. And for those requiring interpretation service, please put on your earpiece and then tune into the channel that you desire. We have already shown the channel numbers on the table. We have a total of 33 deputations today. We also have 7 deputations who are not attending the meeting today, but they have submitted their written submissions. First of all, I'd like to invite the deputations and individuals to speak, and each will be given 3 minutes, and then after you have all spoken, I will invite the administration's representatives to give an initial response, and then afterwards members may put questions to the administration or the deputations. In accordance with our usual practice, unless the written submissions by the deputations cannot be made public, our secretariat will upload the written submissions onto the webpage of the Bills Committee, and it will also be circulated to all members of the Bills Committee. And if you have not yet submitted your written submissions, or you have written submissions to be submitted later, please submit them as soon as possible. I'd also like to remind the deputations who are here, your written submissions and also your remarks made at the meeting will not be covered and protected by the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance. First, I'd like to invite the Insurance Institute of Hong Kong, Mr. Dylan Bryan, to speak first.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Insurance Institute of Hong Kong has been around in Hong Kong for 47 years, and we are predominantly focused on providing educational support to the industry. In context of that, we provide a diploma for practitioners that is dedicated on the Hong Kong market. So a specific type of requirement to pass that is four exams. We also provide continuous professional development and also other seminars and training opportunities for practitioners. We're very pleased that the new legislation has been proposed, and we're very excited to work with the government to make sure that it meets the needs of the industry. A couple of quick comments that I would propose to make, and we were impressed to see that the outline did include a goal of increasing and improving the quality of the practitioners in our industry. Part of what the Insurance Institute of Hong Kong has been focused on is providing better and more focused education. But one of the problems that we do see is that there is not enough emphasis on the quality of the training and not enough requirements for practitioners to attend the training in terms of the amount of training they must undertake. Additionally, insurance company underwriters currently are not required to do any continual professional development. So one of the proposals that I would like to see would be a more rigorous framework around continual professional development, and perhaps even the idea of an entry exam or a qualification exam to become an insurance practitioner, similar to what Series 7 would be in the US, for example. Obviously a lot easier. The reasons that we suggest this would be to, again, provide an academic foundation for practitioners as they enter the industry, the new talents. We want to provide a framework for them to continually develop and learn throughout their careers, and I think that's something that is really important. The couple of other quick points that I would make regarding the legislation is that we would like to see some more reference to captive services. Hong Kong is looking to create a captive domicile here, and we can improve our legislation a little bit around captive services and how those are specifically mentioned in the legislation. The other thing I would also quickly mention is the cover holder model that exists within the Lloyd's framework currently extends to brokers, and I think the opportunity in the new legislation is to enshrine that more permanently and create an avenue for brokers to operate as cover holders within Lloyd's. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. 下一位係香港銀行。
Next, Mr. Gary Leung of Hong Kong Association of Banks. We support the objectives of the bill, including improving the framework for the regulation of the intermediaries. We think this will improve the market and help consumers and raise Hong Kong's position as an insurance center. We think that both non-banks and banks will be able to operate in the same market, and there is going to be a unified set of standards, and I think that will offer consumers uniform protection. And also the powers of sanctions, inspection, etc., are concentrated in the IA, and we think that will enhance efficiency. So we support the bill in general. Now, before the next speaker speaks, please try to use a single language as you speak, either English or Chinese, because we offer simultaneous interpretation, and so try not to mix both languages. Next, General Agents and Managers Association of Hong Kong Limited, Ms. Lillian Lam. Members, I represent the GAMA. We support the IA. It safeguards the public, but we don't want over-regulation because that affects the survival of the industry. Now, we hope to have several points clarified. We already made a submission in the name of IGC. Firstly, in the best interest of the clients, we think this is rather vague. Now, for intermediaries and brokers, they have different functions. There are no guidelines, and we worry about unnecessary litigation in the future. And the sanctions are too heavy, $10 million and 3 times the earnings. We think that this is unfair for small operators, and there are no guidelines. We propose to reduce that to $5 million. Many of the offenses result in criminal sanctions. We are concerned about that. And on the powers of inspection and disciplinary sanctions, we are also very concerned. Now, the IA is given the power to delegate the inspection power to HKMA. We hope that there would be a common standard so that there would be a fairness observed. And also in the 500-odd pages, there's nothing on the establishment of the committee, the details, who will be appointed, what are the criteria, will the industry be represented, and will the staff be totally handling all the inspections, etc. Now, according to the SFC current practice, inspection and auditing is all done by the staff. So this is lacking of counter checks and transparency. We hope that before the bill is passed, we can see the details on how the composition will be reached, and there can be independent professionals such as accountants, lawyers, and consumer counsel. And also on the appeal tribunal, the intermediary has to bear the cost. So if you don't have money, you cannot appeal. That's our worry. And in the 500-odd pages, we hope that would call for more broader consultation. Next, the Hong Kong Insurance Practitioners General Union, Ms. Juan Leung. Now, concerning the amendment bill, we understand it and support it, but we have several comments because they might affect our livelihood. Right now, the public can inspect the personal data of the practitioner and find out what company he works for and what products he can sell. But in the bill, it says that if that person has a criminal record, it can also be seen by public inspection. So we are afraid that this affects the livelihood of our members. And we hope the administration can consider an amendment. also considering past contraventions by the intermediaries. Now, that becomes an offense. We hope that during the transition period there would be more flexibility so that the experienced intermediaries can pass. And also licensed intermediaries, when there is an change to his particulars, he must notify within 15 days. If otherwise, it will be an offense and he can be fined up to $50,000. Now, the intermediaries do not want to commit that offense, but please give us a chance because sometimes we do miss out. So perhaps you can offer only a verbal, provide for only a verbal warning on the first offense. And that will leave us more space. Also on the licensed insurance agencies, now one cannot be the operator or partner of another intermediary organization. But in fact, this has occurred in past decades. We hope that there can be amendment so that we can all have a free economy. And also there is a regulation of licenses under the bill. Now, right now, we don't know what will be the long-term situation. So we hope that there can be amendment or transparency so that we know what the future amendment would be like. Next, Insurance Industry Regulatory and Development Concern Group, Mr. Chen Yim Kwong. Now, we basically support the bill, but we have concerns about certain proposals. But in particular, we are concerned about the best interest provision. It's very vague. Once it's written into law, people can make all sorts of complaints against the agent. They can overturn the contract or demand compensation. It's very unfair. The government hasn't given us a proper answer. Now, Europe and Australia already has things that we can learn from, and the bill has already a provision added that once the contract is against the best interest, then the contract can be voided. We don't think that's the case in Australia and Europe. Their laws don't really apply to Hong Kong. The intermediaries include only brokers, but not agents. Whereas in the Hong Kong market, agents are predominant. Brokers represent the client. They can work with any insurer, but the but the agent can work for only one company. The two are very different. You cannot just introduce arbitrary Australian and European laws. Now, in G20, on concerning the safeguarding the interests of the insured, there is no stringent requirement, and it depends on the MPF is mandatory. But for insurance, mostly it's not mandatory. The two should not be mixed up. Now, as for repealing some of the provisions is unreasonable because the agent is scared that he might be accused of in respect of the best interest. So we think Section 89 on best interest, that should be deleted. And the IIA has too many powers. We think that the processes should be transparent and there should be broad consultation. we think this is complex. We will try to discuss with you in the future. Next, Mr. So Chi Hong. Due to time constraint, I will not ask any questions, but I hope answers can be provided later. I will first show a audio recording. Now, the core values of regulation is that so you can hear that these regulators are self-motivated. So under international standards, you can see on the screen, ICP 2.4.2 only asks that you should avoid participating in decisions involving self-interest. So according to the law, if you make restrictions on appointment, that's undue restriction. And on the levy that forces the intermediaries to pay for the IIA, and if there are civil servants involved, they would ensure greater fairness. So policy holders and civil servants should be appointed. And there's too low a limit in the composition of the board. There should be 12. 4 should be public servants. And there are no international principles for the intervention by IIA. Now, I propose that the financial secretary can arrange for people to join the board to make corrective action. Right now, the IIA operates in a black box and controls the committees and checks itself, and has too much power. And also, Mr. Anthony Leung was the financial secretary, and then he joined AIA. And in the future, if Mr. Anthony Leung becomes the chief executive, then the IIA, in the appointment of directors and the disciplinary committee, will be made up of his supporters. So they might be more than biased, and the industry will be under their control. So the CE and EXCO, apart from them, there should be a mechanism to disband the board. Next, Mr. Mac Wai Hong of the Kwai Chung South Resident Association. I represent the association concerning this bill. We are consumers. We feel it's good. Regulation is better than no regulation. But once the IA is set up, what are our gains and losses? Now, firstly, we look at the charges. In your document, it says that there will be a 0.1% charge in respect of all policies, life insurance, and also $5,000 for the other policies. Do I pay monthly? Now, already for labor insurance, etc., auto insurance, we already pay. So this is additional burden, and the board will be twice as large as the existing counterpart, and it gets $500 million from the government, and then it's to be self-financing for the rest. And the chairman will also get high pay, and there will be expensive officers. So this will be a paradise for former highly paid civil servants. Now the IA will actually be paid for by the policyholders and the intermediaries, etc.
But then in the end, everything will come from the consumers. So in the end, it's the general public who will be paying. So if it cannot meet the expenses, then does it mean that they will have to increase the levy? So in the end, everything will come from the consumers and the policyholders. And then for intermediaries, when they have to pay license fees and when they have to charge these service users, then in the end, it's the consumers who will be paying. And of course, for the sanctions to include jail sentence is reasonable, but then for those defiant brokers, in the end, will all the costs be passed on to the consumers? Well, we do have insurance policies which have an expiry date of less than 1 year, and in the end, for people in the decoration industry, they were concerned of the lack of business. But then, by the time when they have business, they might not be able to take out insurance coverage. And in some cases, the insurers will charge them on a case-by-case basis, and also they will have to add premium and so on and so forth. So if one project would involve 2 insurance policies, then they will have to pay more than $5,000. On top of that, so how much are we going to get? So thank you. Next, Hong Kong Insurance Intermediaries Association, Mr. Cheng Kwok Kee. Thank you, Chairman. I'm the president of the Hong Kong Insurance Intermediaries Association. Well, since the establishment, we have already got a history of more than 3 years. In order to maintain Hong Kong's status as an international financial center and to protect public interests, I think there is a need for the industry to be regulated. And during the past 3 years or so, we have attended some 20 meetings, and the commissioner has been inviting us to meeting, and every time we would be there. And he's a lone fighter facing more than 100 or so of us. And with regard to the concerns on the independence of the authority, well, he's trying to convince us that this is a good way forward. And before accepting our views, I think the administration does seem to have attached a lot of importance to the industry's views. And during the past few months, well, in front of many representatives of the sector, the administration promised that by the time when this bill would be tabled before this council, we would be consulted, and we're talking about some 500 pages of amendments here. And for those of us belonging to different associations, we all work as volunteers. And to scrutinize the provisions clause by clause, do we have enough time for us to think through all the provisions? Well, I noticed that no one would like to stage a fight for no good reasons. So whether or not the administration is trying to act in the public interest, I hope that they would do a better job in order to avoid unnecessary conflicts. With regard to the IAT being proposed, it says that the work will be done by the staff of the authority, and the industry knows best what is involved in the work of the insurance industry, whether or not the complaints have been frivolous or whether or not there are grounds for the complaints and so on. I think we know best, and if there can be more industry's involvement, then we'll be able to avoid frivolous complaints, so that we would not be disturbed by frivolous complaints, and we would also be more efficient and effective in dealing with complaints, and money will be spent more wisely. I therefore hope that the commissioner or the authority and the administration will attach more importance to the views submitted by those practitioners from the trade. And if you ask me to give a score or to give an assessment on this, I think there is no sincerity in the consultation, and the views being submitted were not followed up on, and they have not lived up to their promise, and the small enterprises have been compromised. Next, we have Mr. Lim Chun Hua from the Life Underwriters Association of Hong Kong Limited. Thank you. My name is Lim Chun Hua. I'm from the Life Underwriters Association of Hong Kong Limited. We have some 8,000, 9,000 members, and well, we have about 40,000 practitioners, and together with banks and so on, we might be talking about many more. And what we are most concerned about is the influence of intermediaries, because for underwriters and also, for intermediaries and so on, I think the requirements are rather harsh, because I understand that there's going to be a tribunal or a disciplinary committee which will be staffed entirely by public officers, and they'll be responsible for imposing sanctions or disciplinary actions and so on, and they would be doing so behind closed doors. Supposedly they are experienced, but then, well, for the general practitioners and also life insurance brokers and also agents, well, we do have different roles and responsibilities, and the impact of the tribunal will be significant on these practitioners. We hope that the trade will have a say in the work of the tribunal. We are not trying to influence the decisions, but then at least we should have a say, so that the hearings will be more efficient and effective. Next, apparently, well, as far as banks are concerned, well, we have this twin regulator approach. Well, on the one hand, you say that it's very fair and just, and as intermediaries, we do agree that there should be a unified approach when it comes to regulation. But then, apparently, for banks, they are not subject to a lot of regulation, and people are saying that well, that's a fact, and nothing much can be done about it. So apparently, we can only invoke the privileges ordinance before we can really find out what actually happened. So as a practitioner, I am worried, and indeed many in the trade are also concerned. We hope that the twin regulator approach will work. All right, in Singapore, they have a super regulator, but then in Hong Kong, we don't have that. And in particular, I'm concerned about the information held by banks. Would that be confused with the insurance lines of business? And if that is the case, then we might be having two situations in the same industry. And if that's a de facto situation, then that's not good to the industry. And therefore, I think for the business of banks and also insurance business, they should be separated. And if you try to make reference to overseas practice in overseas countries, in many of these jurisdictions, banks are not allowed to get involved in insurance industry or business. And very rarely would our voices be heard in the tribunal. I hope that more from the practitioner, more from the industry can be heard, and the cost should also not go up. Well, we've been told that this is a civil proceeding, and I hope that you can hear more from the practitioners. Next, the Hong Kong Confederation of Insurance Brokers, Mr. Patrick Chan. Good afternoon, Chairman. Basically, the Hong Kong Confederation of Insurance Brokers are in favor of having this authority, and I hope that appropriate arrangements can be put in place. And I'd also like to share with you some of our views. For example, Section 80 or Clause 84, and also Sections 81 to 83 talks about the disciplinary powers to be exercised by the authority, but then we are concerned that there is no framework or constraints as to how that power is to be exercised, and therefore we are concerned about this. And you also talk about the appeals tribunal and how appeals can be lodged with the higher court, but then there is no provision for the establishment of a committee or board or other body to undertake the initial disciplinary action, and also whether or not the authority is to act as policeman, prosecutor, and judge at the same time. We hope that we can make reference to the existing mechanism so that a disciplinary committee or board will be established under the authority, and there should also be stipulation about an independent chairman with a judicial background, and there should also be broker, agent, or insurer representative sitting on the board, and defendants should also have the right to be legally represented, and so on. And also, they can also reprimand publicly or privately. And actually, under 84D of the CIB, either one can be publicly reprimanded or they could also be warned privately. So if there is sufficient evidence to show that it's a substantiated case, then he should be reprimanded publicly, or if there is not sufficient evidence, then he should be privately warned. And then on fine to be imposed, Clause 84, and the maximum fine can be up to $10 million. We believe that that's too much because when compared to other professions, is way too high. And that would also be beyond the affordability of anyone in the industry. We believe that it should not exceed $1 million. And also Clause 84 also talks about the appeals tribunal to consist of a chairman and 2 other persons. We believe that we should strengthen the chairmanship so that he has to be someone with a judicial background, and then one of the 2 other persons would also have to have working knowledge of the insurance industry, whether it's a broker, an agent, or insurer, depending on the circumstances. And also Clause 84 and also sections 110, 111, and 113 provides that there should also be an appeal to the appeal court, and no other appeal is permitted. But then the cost could also be awarded by the appeal court, but then that would also inhibit somebody or persons to file an appeal. We believe that we should have an appeal tribunal with people with judicial background, and the final appeals board should be chaired by members with judicial backgrounds, and there are also other views in our written submissions. So Chairman and members may wish to refer to that so that we can see that for the employee registration, if the notice period is just 1 month, we believe that is not appropriate. All right, we will look at your written submissions. Next, Professional Insurance Brokers Association, Mr. Philip Mack. Thank you. All right, we are one of the 3 self-disciplinary associations, and with regard to the proposed legislation, we have the following views. We have some 300 company members and also several practitioners. And also in 1992, when the administration introduced the licensing system, well, for those practicing as intermediaries, they were granted a license without having to go through any assessment. So that was the grandfathering arrangement. And on this occasion, well, there will be a 3-year grace period, but then there would be an overhaul, and many will be squeezed out of the business. We believe that after the 3-year period, we can migrate automatically to the new system. But then there are many provisions that are not clear. We believe that the criteria should be clearly defined, and also for past regulatory conduct as the IIA considers to be appropriate, and also conduct requirement. What does that mean? And also for other requirements prescribed by rules made under Section 92 and 123, they are not clear. And it shows that the IIA will be an independent kingdom with excessive powers. We believe that only 1/3 of the directors would have insurance background and actual working experience. At least one should have intermediary experience. In particular, he should be an office bearer in one of these 3 disciplinary authorities, and the advisory committee should also comprise SMEs and also agents and also brokers representatives to help the long-term development of the industry. We believe that the discussion should not be final, and after a decision is taken, then that would have to be implemented.
Now, the limit of the fine. The fine upper limit $10 million, that's too high. Now, the capital requirement is that's very high compared to the capital requirements. Now, in the past, fines have been only up to about $200,000. And for the other professional associations, the fines are also much lower. So we think that the fines should be categorized. And in Section 6040, 64R1, all the number of days are 14 days. This is very different compared to previously, where it's working days, especially during periods like Easter and New Year. I think we should change it to business days, and we also have written submissions on other points. Next, Dr. William Leung Yin Yat of Chinese Academy of Science Alumni Association. Now, we think that the regulation by two organizations is problematic. In 2003, the due regulation of the securities industry caused a lot of defects in the case of the Lehman incident. There wasn't enough supervision on the misconduct of the Lehman products marketing. And the LegCo formed a subcommittee to investigate, and it's found that the division of labor between two regulators is very problematic. And in the subcommittee's report, there are 50 recommendations to improve the regulation of banks and securities industries, to raise transparency on powers of sanctions under one organization. So there have been many improvement measures to plug the loopholes arising from dual regulators. Now, the dual regulators policy has caused losses to the public and to the finance industry, and the government hasn't learned the lesson. And right now, it is not the case. There should be a division. So the HKMA should impose regulations only on the banking industry. We think the dual regulator system has many loopholes, and there should be amendments here. And we think there should be only one regulator for the industry. The simple way is that the bank's insurance departments should be taken out so that they become new insurance companies. Next, Wildlife Residents Association, Mr. Jackie Chan. As an ordinary member of the public, I support the stepped-up regulation of the insurance industry. And we think there should be clear guidelines. But the most important point, I think, is that in the regulatory process, certain things will be to the disadvantage of the public. For instance, under the proposed regulations, after the IA is set up for 3 years, the intermediaries need to re-register, but the provisions didn't stipulate what are the requirements for registration. It only mentions fit and proper criteria. Now, under existing provisions, there would be various demands on academic and professional qualifications and experience, and one has to pass exams. And a speaker just now mentioned in 95 there was a transition period. Not all the practitioners meet the new criteria, so consumers are concerned that these agents that we picked ourselves have been trusted by us, but after 3 years, many brokers and agents might be weeded out. That's our concern. For instance, last year, Zurich Life Insurance changed its policy. 700 odd agents were dismissed in one go. So this was the largest one-off dismissal exercise in the insurance industry. Some of my friends lost their jobs. Actually, these agents may be our friends, and so we are left as orphans. So we hope that the government can ensure that consumers will not become orphans. We hope that the bill can ensure that the practitioners can migrate smoothly and re-register. Next, ILA concern group, Mr. Kwan, Harry Kwan. Now, I also represent the frontline staff. Now, the proposed IA has two main functions. One is to safeguard the interests of the policyholders. Second, to promote the industry's development. Now, we think, of course, it's important to safeguard the interests of the policyholders. That's the wish of us frontline staff. They are our clients. We support appropriate legislation. If some frontline staff use illegal means to serve their own interests and cheat on the clients, we support heavy sanctions. But on the IIA, we think it's not good because, firstly, the IIA will double the staff, and the government will inject $500 million, and then it will self-finance. Now, the senior staff there earn millions of dollars a year. They become a party for senior officials, so the cost might all be borne by the consumers. And also, the SMEs and individual agents might be disadvantaged, and they young people will not be able to join the industry. And in the U.S., there has been price rigging. We don't want that to happen in Hong Kong. And also, the IA is supposed to promote the industry's development. How can they promote it? They are not made up of practitioners. Now, it will be a waste of money. Now, if they spend $10 million, we can do the same or better with $1 million. Now, we should go back to the spirit of self-regulation, prudent finances, etc. Finally, I think in the past decade, we have so many new authorities. They all serve different functions, but in fact they take over some of the work from the government. In other words, the work is outsourced. Hopefully, the money will be saved, but in fact, when the work is outsourced, the industry has to pay levies, the public has to pay, and yet the government hasn't downsized itself. So this is an industry of 100,000. It's 12.3% of GDP. If you are going to establish an IA, you must really be careful. Next, Hong Kong General Insurance Agents Association, Mr. Ma Chen Kei. Now, on behalf of the association, we have, in fact, submitted written reports. First point on the composition of the board. Now, members asked this question in the Bills Committee. There would be at least 2 experienced industry persons. So we are concerned that it might be just 2. And members asked a minimum of 2. Then it can be made up, the entire board can be made up of the practitioners, the trade, so it would be self-regulation. So instead, we think there should be a set percentage. We think 34% should be people from the trade. And also the bill mentions regulation throughout, insurance companies and intermediaries. And these are the 2 major groups of policyholders. Both should be represented on the board. And also, in 84, Clause 84 and 92F, it says that the licensed person has to disclose the commission and the interest of its gains. That includes the intermediaries, licensed intermediaries, includes agents and brokers. Now we represent the insurance companies. Why is it that we have to disclose all our earnings? We are different from brokers, so we propose to delete that provision. Also, in Clause 71, 64J, it says that a person cannot at the same time be the director of another agency and the existing ICO, in the existing ordinance, there's similar wording, but this is sitting on the board of another company is not entirely ruled out. Now, if you merely offer advice, you can still be a director. So we propose that also agents and brokers are different. So we think that the old provisions, old Section 65 should be preserved. Next, the Hong Kong Insurance Law Association Limited, Mr. Declan McDade.
Hong Kong Insurance Law Association has submitted a formal paper which builds on points that were gathered together in a discussion together with the Hong Kong Federation of Insurance. I'd like to just make 3 very basic points about the ordinance. There are some more general points that are made in the paper, and the paper is obviously a much more comprehensive document. The 3 points I'd like to make deal with representation on the board, and they deal with some of the conduct requirements. Dealing with representation on the board first, one of the stated aims of the IIA is to formulate effective regulatory strategies and facilitate the sustainable market development of the insurance industry. It's essential, we say, that if this is to be carried out, that the industry is properly represented. As you'll see from the delegations here today, the industry is wide and diverse, and therefore it needs to be represented properly, and that means people writing long-term business need to be represented, the brokers need to be represented, the agents need to be represented, people writing general business, and of course there is also a reinsurance element to this as well. The reinsurers can't be left out of this. It's a very, very, very broad industry. With regard to the conduct requirements, sections 89, 90 and 91 introduce an obligation on the part of intermediaries to act in the best interests of the policyholder. This contradicts the common law as it stands. and it will create a great deal of practical difficulty for the industry. And this has already been alluded to by a number of the speakers that have been before us today. And we would just like to reiterate that it will cause problems, and it is in contradiction of the law as it stands. The second point under the conduct element of this subsection of the paper is that there is an introduction of the words best endeavours. Now this seems to be lifted almost directly from the Mandatory Provident Fund Schemes Ordinance, and therefore that is a different organisation and a different entity altogether, and therefore the introduction of the best endeavours is not something that the insurance industry will necessarily benefit from. It will also cause difficulty for agents in that the laws that their obligations will change overnight in relation to this ordinance. Agents normally act for the insurance company. The landscape will change dramatically for them, and they will effectively become brokers. So the intermediaries, the division between the intermediaries will disappear effectively with this ordinance. So it's just those 3 points that we would like to reiterate on behalf of the Hong Kong Law Association. Thank you.
Thank you. 下一位。
Thank you. Next, Mr. Cheng Lai Pong, President of the Insurance and Finance Practitioners Solidarity Sector. Yes, I'm the President of the Insurance and Finance Practitioners Solidarity Sector. Well, we are formed by some frontline practitioners, and we're concerned about some existing unfair treatment for agents and intermediaries. We understand that with the amendment bill, the authority would be subject to the regulation by the administration. It will also have to be accountable to the public, and we believe that we're in favor of all policyholders should be protected by law. Well, in the industry right now, we have this self-disciplinary situation, and then for intermediaries licensing system, well, we have this registration system. On the face of it, it has nothing to do with the commission, because the commission says that we can be registered with 2 life insurers, but then once we are registered with one, when we try to register with another one, we have to have the consent of the first one before we can register with the second one. And very often in the course of operation, the insurer would monopolize the business, and there would also not be a fair or level playing field, and there would also not be healthy competition, and that would also affect our interests. And for the consumers, this is not the best choice, and therefore we are aware of this, and we believe that that would also not be conducive to the long-term development of the industry. We believe that a truly independent IIA is needed, and with government supervision, we should have a statutory intermediary licensing system to replace the existing self-disciplinary system, which is unfair to the intermediaries. We should not allow the insurers to stifle the survival of intermediaries, and the intermediaries should be able to act in accordance with their own choice, so that there would not be monopoly, which would stifle competition. Also, in terms of the regulation of intermediaries, we believe that the IRA should not just be regulating intermediaries with regard to insurance companies. In terms of the employment of intermediaries, there should be assurance, or there should be fair treatment, because at present the relationship is not fair, because all the contractual terms are in favor of the insurance companies. We hope that the IIA will be able to regulate the employment system, so that there would be a win-win situation, so that the insurance policyholders, the insurance companies, and also the intermediaries. And for intermediaries, we hope that it should be like the existing commission. So it would not just be regulating the industry. We should also be looking into the present situation whereby intermediaries are seriously suppressed by the insurance companies, because they are not involved in a discussion with the companies with regard to some of the existing situations, and as a result, some insurance companies will be able to have a heavy hand on the intermediaries. We hope that we will not be defined as self-employed. We should be treated more fairly under the law. Next, we have Mr. Lee Chun Ming, Secretary of the Hong Kong Chamber of Insurance Intermediaries. Good afternoon, Chairman, we expect that the new law would be able to not just protect the interests of the policyholders, but also the frontline intermediaries, so that they can be given more room for survival. We would like to look at 6 areas, and we hope that the administration can look into that. First, unlicensed intermediaries, they will have to act in the best interest of the policyholders. We hope that the administration will change the words at the best interest, and also licensed intermediaries, the number of companies that they can represent should also be regulated so as to serve the interests of the policyholders. And also, with regard to the profit margin, we believe that the fine that can be imposed is too high. We hope that there can be a guideline for the industry in order to allay our concerns. And also for intermediaries, if they do not agree with the fine imposed, we hope that there can be a chance for us to represent ourselves or to make a representation, so that there can be a mechanism so that the intermediaries will be able to make a face-to-face representation. And also with regard to the composition of the authority and also the involvement of the industry, we hope that at least 25% of the representatives should come from the industry. We hope that there can be representatives representing the intermediaries. We believe that independence is very important, but then professional knowledge is also very important. We hope that with the involvement of the intermediaries, that would also add to the credibility of the authority. And also we hope that the intermediaries will be able to migrate to the new system without any condition, and that would also help guarantee the employment opportunities of the intermediaries, and that will also ensure the long-term development of the profession. With regard to the restriction to be imposed on intermediaries, well, if a licensed intermediary is to pass on business to another intermediary for a consideration, and if they pay certain consideration in order to get the service, is it that we cannot refer business? Because within our profession, much knowledge is very deep and broad, and not all intermediaries understand everything. For example, for shipping, maritime and aviation, these are very professional services or specialist services, and therefore it's a common practice for us to refer business. We hope that that can be reconsidered. And also, with regard to licensed insurance companies, with regard to the number of intermediaries, they cannot be the director or employee of a licensed company, and if they were to be involved in regulated activities, then with regard to any matter under regulated activities, we hope that there can be clearer definition, because we understand that they cannot wear 2 hats. But then if directors or shareholders are not to be involved in internal training or financial arrangement of the company and so on, then if that could break the law, then that would also affect the normal takeover, acquisition, and also other activities. We hope that more guidelines can be provided. Thank you. Next, Life Underwriters and Sales Executives Board, Hong Kong Limited, Mr. Samuel Yong. Yes, I'm president of the Life Underwriters and Sales Executives Board. We have over 1,000 managers representing some 10,000 intermediaries in order to promote the interests of the intermediaries and also to enhance our competitiveness. We support the establishment of an IIA, but then with regard to the amendment bill, we believe that there leaves something to be desired. For example, the best interest, for example, honesty, fair, and also avoidance of conflict of interest, and also we have to be competent and so on. We all agree with that. But then to ensure that it's in the best interest of the policyholders is too vague and it's difficult to define. And also for policyholders, when they take out the insurance, if they are healthy at the time, but then afterwards there can be many changes. And also the policyholders might not be willing to let the intermediaries know their financial position and so on, and therefore at the time of legislation, if there is no clear guideline or definition to specify that after completing certain procedures it would already equate to acting in the best interest of the policyholders, there would be many complaints, and the policyholders would only be taking things in their favor. Well, our competitor Singapore has not included the words in the best interest of the policyholders in the law, and they only require the advisors to be honest, fair, and acting in good faith in order to ensure that the financial sector's good reputation can be maintained. And also in the proposed law, there are a lot of conduct requirements and also disciplinary actions and sanctions to protect the interests of the consumers. I therefore suggest that at the time of the legislation, if you're not able to provide very clear definition and guideline on the words best interest, then I suggest that the best interest words should be taken out. And also, the bill also suggests that for intermediaries subject to disciplinary action and fine, that could be $10 million or 3 times the profit, the larger will take effect, and to us it's astronomical figure, and then it's quite a far cry from what we are getting as profit, and we believe that for $10 million, if it's reduced to $5 million, is already more than adequate. And also the purpose of the bill is to effectively monitor the development of the trade and also to enhance our global competitiveness. And therefore, with regard to the appointment of board directors, it should be reduced to 1/4 to be members from the trade, and also for the companies and also the intermediaries, they should also be represented in order to ensure that professional advice given would be closely aligned to the market, and also to ensure that within the board, most members would be non-trade practitioners. And as I am also the convener of a coalition on the concern group for life underwriters and so on, many of my views have been included in the written submission. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Lister from the Law Society of Hong Kong.
There's a number of legal concerns over the bill, and a number of those have been expressed already today. A written submission will be made to the committee. I will only express 2 of our concerns regarding insurance law of this bill. Firstly, one concern relates to the multiple roles to be played by the IIA, that is, as regulator and rulemaking body, investigator, prosecutor and judge. This clearly contravenes the traditional separation of powers and may contravene the rule of law. It is certainly undesirable for a regulator to have a direct interest in an enforcement action. In order to ensure adequate checks and balances, the Law Society suggests that prosecutorial decisions of the IAA should be reviewed internally or independently by persons not involved in the prosecution process. The second concern I would draw your attention, which has already been expressed earlier, is the requirement under Section 89A of the bill, of the ordinance, proposed ordinance, that a licensed insurance intermediary must act in the best interests of the policyholder or potential policyholder. This obligation is expressed to apply to licensed insurance agents who are the agent of an authorised insurer. The Law Society's concern is that this proposal contradicts both the well-understood principles of the law of agency, where the agent acts in the best interests of his principal, and places the agent in an inherently conflicting position. New Section 68A(1) attempts to address this concern by providing that any provision in an agreement between the insurer and the insurance agent which purports to affect this obligation shall be void. In our opinion, this solution fails to address our concern adequately. A better solution would be to limit this requirement to insurance brokers only. The Law Society is further concerned that this provision muddles the roles of insurance broker and insurance agent. If the proposal stands effectively, it will mean that there will be no insurance agents, as they have traditionally been known, but only insurance brokers whose duties are to act in the best interests of policyholders and potentially policyholders. This consequence has not been expressed as a policy objective of the legislation. Even if one ignores the legal concern expressed, there are also practical concerns with this proposal. Is an insurance agent required to acquaint himself with and advise on the potentially more suitable products of other insurers? Would a cheaper product offered by another insurer be in the best interests of the potential policyholder? The Law Society is also concerned as to what are best interests of the policyholder. How are they to be determined and from whose perspective? The IIA may issue guidelines on this matter, but the Law Society is concerned whether they would actually be helpful. It is also submitted that there is a requirement on the agent to have regard to particular circumstances of the policyholder, and we would argue that that sufficiently addresses these concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Ms. Lee Long, Ms. Arthur Lee.
Board, which was likely mentioned by quite a few in the delegation. It was stated that the representation of the board should be from a well-diverse occupations in order for an array of opinions to be heard and considered. However, this decision may backfire and unleash disastrous consequences if changes will not be made. It is vital for a good proportion of professional opinions to be included in the governing board, in which I suggest a minimum of 25% representation. I do not think that this number is hard to achieve, knowing that the HKTDC has a mandatory percentage of 30%. As the insurance industry is a heavily specialized field, at least some of the board members in the IIA should have high level of knowledge and experiences. Decisions made by the IIA should not be taken lightly, as it affects all stakeholders involved in the business. If we stand on the point of an amateur with no specialized knowledge was selected in the board, it's all Greek to them if they were in a meeting. Not only they will need to put in extra efforts to get some knowledge of the bigger picture. These people who deal with insurances on a daily basis does all the groundwork and may have to suffer from the consequences from a decision that was made by amateurs. The contribution of an amateur can bring to the table may be limited, and I don't think it would be asking for too much if this one more spot is given up to somebody else that will have a better concept. Also, what would you think if you were to buy an insurance which was following the framework that's passed by a crowd of amateurs? Would you still have the courage to do so? I wouldn't think so. The lack of professional representation does not only affect the credibility of the IIA, it affects the credibility of the whole industry, will lead people to question the judiciary system. I really fear the future of the industry and the authority that would be left after gaining people's disbelief. Thank you.
Thank you. 下一位係張
Next, Ms. Cynthia Chung. Like many people, I purchase insurance cover. I'm a university student. Now, we are concerned that we have to pay more. And this bill has many defects still. For instance, if there is an IIA, it is independent of the government. It regulates itself. It's not monitored by the LegCo. The directors are all appointed by the CE. So they may be supporters of the CE, or they may be ex-senior officials. How can we trust them? And the bill says that there should be at least 2 directors who have insurance practitioners' knowledge. Now, but the number is not definite. It's very vague. So non-professionals may outnumber the professionals, and they may make wrong decisions. Also, levies. The IA has to be financially independent of the government, so there is a 0.1% levy. Now, students like me may have 1 or 2 policies only, but friends or relatives of ours have different policies, so it all adds up. For low-income families, this is a very difficult burden, and you monitor the staff with all kinds of requirements, and those are also very costly, and the costs are eventually borne by us. So nobody buys insurance, so you lose the purpose of establishing an IA. Next, Mr. Henry Ng. Good afternoon. When I learned that the IA is to be set up, I oppose it. I think that setting up IA is impractical. The data show that 80% of the public are against the 0.1% levy, and it's shown that 40-odd% are against the establishment of the IA, and the public think that the problem doesn't lie usually with the intermediaries. So setting up the IA may suffocate the industry. The self-regulatory mechanism, I believe, is quite effective. There are 3 self-regulatory organizations that cover insurance agents and brokers. They license qualified people, and they have the power to suspend the license. And then there's a committee that handles about 1,400 complaints every year. The members include members of Law Society, Accountants Association, Consumer Council, retired civil servants, and 3 industry practitioners. So this is this is quite enough. So there should be no need for IA. And for members of the public, when we pay the levies, it's equivalent to paying more tax. So that reduces my intention to get insurance cover. So that reduces the chance of employment of the insurance practitioners, and that's not good for the Hong Kong economy. Now, coming back to the system, I think there's a lack of transparency. There's no disclosure of the methodology of the consultants. I think you should try to improve the existing mechanism instead. If you remove self-regulation, the spirit of self-regulation may be lost. Next, Mr. Alex Fu. I am a member of the public who buys insurance cover. I'm not a professional, but I take the view of the member of the public. Now, the power of inspection is very great. Without warrants, the inspection staff can make copies or even take away the documents. Now, this is very trying on their professional conduct. Now, if they have a low standard, then they may lose the documents. The documents may include data on our phone number, bank account number, ID number. Now, our personal data privacy is not protected. Now, there are no provisions to safeguard against that. Our data may be lost. We hope that there should be provisions to address that. Also, there's the provision that gives the CE power to appoint or dismiss members of the board. He has the power to control all that happens in that board. Why don't we discuss this together? We should let the public have a way to participate in the decision process. Also in the IA can set its own salaries and appoint its staff. Now, $500 million is injected at the outset. This is not a small amount. We think that the public should be able to participate, not merely at the outset, but also subsequently. Now, the bill is of good intent, but there are too many loopholes. Next, Mr. Fong, Michael Fong. Now, I'm not an insurance professional or practitioner, but I'd like to air my views as a member of the public. First, there are complaints about insurance company from 300 odd in 2011 to 400 odd last year, and IA should be set up speedily to offer protection to the public. Now, the industry feels that the board should be made up of practitioners to the level of 30%. that includes the intermediaries. Now, I feel that some members of the board should be there to countervail against the powers of the practitioners to enhance the credibility of the board. And the administration says that in order to effect supervision, policyholders and intermediaries should be able to appoint persons to enhance the supervision of the conduct of the persons concerned. The government should consider directly appointing persons to engage in this work so as to prevent the industry to appoint its own people. Also, the administration says that the regulatory body, if it discloses the subject of investigation before the investigation is completed, that would be unfair. Now, I want to ask, once the investigation is complete, would the details of the investigation be completely disclosed? Also, the government says that the IAA will not have the necessary business knowledge to design new products, but the board is supposed to be made up at least partly of practitioners. So the IAA, if it doesn't have the necessary knowledge, then the industry may engage in deceptive practices. Also, another document provided by LegCo, it says that the IAA will set up an expert group to offer views to the IAA on specific products. Sorry, your time has exceeded already. Next, Mr. Alan Yu of the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers. I am chairman of the task force on the independence of the insurance authority. Now, we have 130 members. Apart from promoting the development of the industry, we are also responsible for self-regulation. We support very much an independent insurance authority. We think that this will help to advance the professionalism of the industry and enhance people's confidence in it. So we support the amendments. The insurance is also an important pillar of our financial sector. Last year, our premium income for Hong Kong is 29 million. It's about 3% of Hong Kong's GDP. Right now, there are 150 insurance companies in Hong Kong. The industry employs about 100,000. Now, life insurance policies exceed 10 million. General insurance policies also 10 million a year. Now, it's a major industry. We are very glad to see that the IA's functions will include promoting the policyholders' understanding of the industry, enhancing the protection of their interests, formulating effective supervisory policies, promoting the sustainable development of the industry, and promoting the competitiveness of the industry in the world. But we believe the provisions should be appropriate. If there is over-regulation and imposing unnecessary risk, then the industry may be suffocated and insurance company may move abroad and we may lose talents. So we think the administration should improve on several points. So first, increase the number of people with professional knowledge sitting on the board, at least 25%. There should be a meeting at least every 2 months to examine important matters and set their own agenda. There should be an independent mechanism on imposing sanctions. Now, avoiding unnecessary civil action, and the fines should be proportional to their financial means so that intermediaries will not become bankrupt. The cost of appeal, there should be an upper limit so that the intermediaries will not fail to raise appeal. Next, Mr. Ambrose Cheung of Insurance Agents Registration Board. The board's main functions are to be responsible for the registration and licensing of the about 700,000 agents in Hong Kong.
同埋亦都係保障投保人嘅公眾利益嘅。喺過去嗰10年裏邊呢，我係用個人獨立專業嘅身份呢嚟參與呢個義務嘅工作。亦都係我公眾嘅服務裏邊嘅重要嘅一環。我嘅觀點呢，主要係從獨立、專業同埋香港嘅整體嘅利益呢嚟做出發點嘅。今次嘅修訂嘅法例，我哋香港市民同埋保險界呢都係十分重視。我亦都好高興見到今日呢好多業界嘅代表同埋我哋嘅市民，特別一啲年輕嘅市民呢，係自發咁嚟表達佢嘅意見。我第一個感覺就係我哋需要利用時間，好好利用時間呢，係去確保呢個法例呢係能夠做。
Take time for us to ensure that the bill will be proper and comprehensive, and I'll be focusing on how we can ensure that the internal workflow and checks and balance of the IIA will be appropriate to ensure that the system will be comprehensive and healthy. Well, under the bill, it proposes that for disciplinary action is taken, well, when the authority or feels that any of the agents or the practitioner has not been acted properly, then there could be sanctions, and that could also affect the career of the person involved. And the authority does have extensive discretionary power to determine if an intermediary has acted in contravention of the rules, and for investigation, prosecution, and ruling, that all the powers will be concentrated in the hands of the authority. We believe that the authority will act independently, but then under the current bill, as it is drafted, it is not able to provide a guarantee, and there is also no checks and balance. And of course, if you were the person involved in a hearing, and if you lose the case, and if you have to file an appeal, and if you lose it again, then the legal cost of the authority would also not be affordable to an ordinary member of the public. That's why there needs to be checks and balances, and we share the view of the Law Society. There should be an internal review committee so that for any sanctions to be imposed, the review committee will review the decision and be the final adjudicator, and we do not have to have full-time staff, and the members of the review committee should come from members outside the practitioner. And I think it's almost like the operations review committee of the ICAC. It would be able to serve as a checks and balance, and it would also not be undermining the efficiency and effectiveness of the IIA. Next, General Insurance Council of the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers, Mr. Ronnie Ng, Chairman and members, good afternoon. I'm Ronnie Ng, Chairman of the General Insurance Council of the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers. First, on the new disciplinary action, well, it applies to both intermediaries and insurance companies, and if the authority feels that they are not a fit and proper person to hold a license, there could be different forms of sanction, including reprimand, suspension, or revocation of license, and a fine could also be as high as $10 billion. And if they have engaged in misconduct, there could also be a fine of $10 million or 3 times the profit. The larger would apply. And for a large intermediary, that might be reasonable. But then for those earning very petty profits, then that's an astronomical figure, and whether or not they have not acted properly, well, it's difficult to define, and the IIA will also have a lot of discretionary power, and also the authority will be playing the roles of an investigator, a prosecutor, and also the judge, and without proper checks and balance, an IIA might impose too hefty a sentence on the intermediary. For some minor breaches, they could also go bankrupt. We believe that for the individual intermediaries, if they have to take up so much risk, that's not reasonable. It's not like barristers, solicitors, and others in other professions, and the maximum fine would be up to $500,000. And then as an insurance intermediary, they could be fined up to $10 million. This is simply not reasonable. We therefore propose that for any fine to be imposed, it must be proportionate to the financial position of the person involved. And in the light of our concern, the FSTB said that whether or not the licensee has already got some monetary benefit or advantage, we should not be putting that person in financial difficulty. And therefore, if the intention of the fine depends on the financial position of the person or the intermediary, then that should be clearly defined in the law instead of allowing the authority to have discretionary power on that. We are also very concerned about Clause 71, 64J, and 64K, restricting the insurance agencies, directors, and for insurance agents company, they would not be subject to the same control, and there would be unequal treatment of both types, and that will also affect the professional development of the insurance industry. That will also affect the survival of insurance agents companies, because they will not be able to transfer some of the life insurance business. We believe that those should be amended. Thank you. Next, Mr. Mike Lee, Deputy Chairman of Life Insurance Council of the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers. Yes, I'm Mike Lee, representing the Life Insurance Council. Would like to talk about the conduct rule or the code of conduct under the bill. Well, Clause 89 says that for intermediaries, they would be subject to certain conduct rule. For example, they will have to be honest, fair, and they will have to act in the best interest of the policy holders. And the intermediaries would also be required to make their best endeavor to ensure that their interests and the policyholders would not be in conflict. So that where there is any conflict of interest, they would also have to disclose that interest to the policyholders. But then the thing is, for such requirements, for the insurance agents acting on behalf of the company, they have a duty, and there would be conflict. And for the insurance agents, they would find it difficult to understand, and they might also not be able to comply with the requirement. And if you just interpret it on the face of it, then there might be a lot of consequence. In fact, there would be difficulty for the agents to follow such requirements, that they will have to make their best endeavor to avoid any conflict of interest between them and the policyholders. First, while making the best endeavor, the definition is not clear. So, what is the difference between making the best endeavor and reasonable endeavor? And second, the requirement of making the best endeavor would be excessively high. For other professions, they would only be required to make reasonable efforts. But then for insurance agents, they will have to make their best endeavor. I think this is too heavy a duty, and this is also not fair. Thirdly, there is a requirement, in fact, under the military retirement protection scheme ordinance. I think we've copied that from the from that ordinance, and the requirement on the trustee would be very high. We believe that that should not be applied to insurance agents. We are also worried that with the new requirements, that would also give rise to unnecessary civil proceedings, because policyholders can say that the insurance agents are suspected to have violated that rule, and they can initiate civil proceedings against the agents, and therefore there have to be appropriate amendments in the bill to stipulate clearly that the new requirement would not give rise to civil proceedings. Last but not least, I'd like to say that we are concerned about the appeal mechanism. Under the law, if anybody feels that the IIA has taken certain disciplinary action, and if he feels aggrieved, then he can file an appeal with the IAT, the Insurance Appeal Tribunal. But then under Clause 104, the party losing the case will have to pay for part of the legal cost. Is about 2/3 of the actual legal cost, and for the appellant that would be a hefty cost, and that would also be inhibiting. That's not fair. I therefore hope that you can hear this view. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Next, Insurance Claims Complaints Bureau, Mr. Stephen Kwok. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Kwok. I'm a member of the General Committee of the Insurance Claims Complaints Bureau. With regard to the lack of representative from the agents we're concerned, there are 9 types of long-term business and 17 general insurance businesses, and that would also cover different areas and different insurance products. Most of them are very professional and specialized, and for the policyholders, we have individual consumers, SMEs, professional bodies, and also organizations, and also major consortia, and so on. And within the trade, we have more than 100,000 practitioners, including paid staff, and also insurance agents and also brokers. We also have more than 159 insurance companies involving some 69,000 registered agents, and also some brokers companies, and also CEOs and trade representatives. And in some organizations, they are multinationals and they have business all over the world. And some of them are insurance agents or companies operated by individuals. It's a very complex market, and the work is not just about regulating the business. We also have to promote the development of the industry. We also have to enhance the competitiveness of the industry, and therefore to be independent, the authority must understand how the profession operates and also understands the global development before it will be able to help the trade to rise to the challenges ahead. And amongst directors, there have to be no less than 2 with professional knowledge, and also non-executive directors with such knowledge. We believe that that's not enough. What's more important, the number of members is not restricted. And assuming that within the authority we have 16 members, and for those with relevant knowledge, if there are only 2, then they would only account for just 1/8 of the total number of members on the IIA. About 12.5% is too low a percentage, and it would not enable the board to play its role properly. We believe that the law should stipulate that at least some 25% of the members of the IIA board should have relevant insurance experience and knowledge, and they should also represent different roles and positions, for example, reinsurers and also agents and brokers and so on. At present, there are 3 self-disciplinary authorities, and they can also nominate their own members. For example, for the financial sector, some members are also nominated by the Hong Kong ICPA. We believe that the above recommendations would constitute any conflict of interest. We can actually make reference to the existing mechanism of many statutory bodies, for example, declaration of interest, or they could also withdraw or refrain from voting, and that would also help avoid any conflict of interest that might arise. I hope that you can consider our suggestions carefully to ensure that the IIA will be able to discharge its duties properly. Next, Employees Compensation Insurance Residual Scheme Bureau, Mr. Ben Chong. Chairman, members, good afternoon. I'm the Deputy Chairman of the Employees Compensation Insurance Residual Scheme Bureau. We are concerned that under the new IIA, the board and also the advisory committee's trade representatives, the proportion of them is our concern.
The board must include 2 persons with knowledge and experience of the industry, non-executive directors. This is a good beginning, but there are still 2 problems. If there are only 2 industry representatives, it's insufficient to cover the specialized sectors in the trade, for instance, sales, product development, etc. Also, the number of directors is not subject to an upper limit. If non-industry people are in the majority, then the industry will be outweighed by these people. And we think that there should be sufficient industry representatives sitting on the board, and these representatives should cover all the major subsectors so that the industry can be promoted in its development. And the 2 committees on long-term business and general business offer advice. They are very important. They can address the concerns of the industry. The industry support that mechanism, but the current bill doesn't specify that the IA will consult these 2 committees. The advisory committees will only be passively requested to offer views. If the IA chooses not to solicit their views, then the committees cannot exercise their functions and fulfill their roles. The industry feels that these provisions should be amended. The IA, in matters that affect the industry, should consult the advisory committees. The committees should be able to propose items on the agenda. This way, agreement can more easily be reached on proposed policies. Also, the frequency of the meetings should be at least once every 2 months instead of 3 months. This will cater more to the needs of the market. So we think that the board should be more representative in order to effect more effective management and better market development. Next, Mr. Turner of the Independent Finance Advice Association. 獨立理財顧問委協會嘅係 Turner 先生，我有一個43歲嘅會計文員，佢呢係13,000銀嘅人工一個月，儲蓄其中一部分喺個
with monthly premiums totaling $30,000 a month, drip-fed from that savings account. At the end of 24 months, she had $80,000 in the savings account, and the cash values of her policies were $340,000. $420,000 total assets. 2 years ago it was $800,000. Yes, she eventually got, after 14 months of very difficult efforts, she received a refund of $792,000 of the premiums. But this is a case that will not go into the statistics, because to receive that refund, she had to sign a withdrawal of complaint form. That's the story. Now here's the point. This is death by 1,000 cuts for the insurance buying public through the banks, rather than the financial tsunami that occurred with Lehman Minibond. Now, being enshrined into this bill and to the Hong Kong law is the ability of the HKMA to inspect and investigate, and also being enshrined is the ability of the HKMA to supervise the selling of their intermediaries inside the banks. We can't stop that. That is power and that is authority. And we know that when you have power and when you have authority, which is in excess of responsibility, the power and the authority gets abused. Yet we see in this bill no attempt to address the responsibility element that should be placed on the bank, on the shoulder of the HKMA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. 嗱，我哋而家呢就仲有大約
We have 10 minutes before the end of the meeting. There's only one member who wishes to speak, Mr. Chan Kim Po. Thank you for attending to give us your views. There have been major issues like best interest, best endeavor, fines, composition of the board. But I think most meaningful is the point made by Law Society. It points out that the IA will be responsible for many functions. For instance, in investigation, it does the investigation, is the prosecutor, and it's also the judge. We need checks and balance. So this is a major problem with the bill. And secondly, there's an excellent point that the agents and brokers are mixed up together under the bill, but actually they are clearly distinguished inside the industry. There are different associations and committees, so they are different altogether, but the regulation mixes them up together. We have held many meetings with the administration on these matters. We hope that the government will address the views expressed today, either verbally or written, and give us detailed responses so that we can follow up. I hope the administration can promise to do that. And also, I'd like you to be able to tell us right now. Now, the Insurance Intermediaries Association said that there will be migration for 3 years, but after 3 years, do we have to sit for exams again? People are concerned. Now, you told us that there will be no new exams. Please give us this commitment here now so that people don't have to worry about having to take exams after 3 years. Please confirm that. Now, and also, if you have any other clarifications, please, by all means, tell us. Mr. Chang Kwok-Kei, I think we will have to leave some time for the administration to respond. Sorry. Would be who will be the speaker? Thank you. How much time do I have? I will try to be as brief as possible. At most 6 minutes. You have to end by 4:30. Now, due to time constraint, we have to resolve some more complex issues at the Bills Committee later. But concerning some misunderstandings, I need to clarify. Firstly, it's mentioned just now, last year, life insurance policies, 10 million policies. Now, Hong Kong has millions of members of the public with policies. So the biggest stakeholder of the IA is the public. So, but of course, we also attach a lot of importance to the views of the industry. Now, in 2003, the IMF already proposed that we already should set up an independent insurance authority. It's been 11 years now. If we are, so it's not it's something done in a hurry. We have done many rounds of consultations. We have shown our bill to the industry and listened to their views. And in the 10 major areas, we have made amendments in response to the industry. And the amendments were tabled to LegCo on 16th of April this year. And I'd like to mention that the major associations offered many valuable comments to us. We like to thank you. Now, on the principles of conduct, now one must be honest and act in the best interest of the policyholders. Now, this is very basic, simple requirement. And to be simple, you must be honest and place your client's interests first. Now, the association already issued a guideline in February 2012 requiring that the intermediaries should act with integrity and act in the best interest of the client. Now, the wording is practically the same as that in the bill. And there have been concerns about possible litigation. Now, looking at the records, since the guidelines were issued in 2011, there hasn't been any civil litigation as a result, it seems. Also, some say that the guidelines may be unclear. Now, the regulatory body always relies on guidelines. And, for instance, the association issues guidelines itself on the conduct of the agents. So our proposals are actually very similar to existing mechanisms. On the composition of the board and the procedures, it's been discussed a lot already. Some speakers want many industry representatives on the board. Some say that the board should be more independent. So we have to strike a balance. Right now we have a very flexible arrangement. The bill says that there must be at least 2 directors from the industry, and there is no upper limit to the number. Now, the industry has asked for 25% or 30%, but in fact, it can be more, it can be less. Now, every organization has to appoint the most appropriate people to sit on the board, and that includes the government. Now, also, some fear that the cost of appeal may be exorbitant. I can't understand that because we are merely proposing that there will be an appeals tribunal, and it will be chaired by someone who can be qualified to sit on the High Court as a judge. And we say in the bill that when there are costs, there may be claims for the cost, and then the tribunal will decide. And when the tribunal makes the decision, it will act according to High Court Order 62, the criteria listed therein. Now, these criteria include the reasonableness of the arguments, whether there has been exaggeration, etc. Now, what's the difference from the existing arrangement? Let's look at the association itself. It has an appeals tribunal. It has rules which stipulate that one can seek legal opinion. And in Article 17 on the cost, it says that the tribunal of the association can issue an order that the losing side has to pay the cost. The lawyers, the tribunal will set the level of cost to be borne according to the High Court rules. So that's the same. We have merely borrowed the existing mechanism to a large extent. So the association says that the cost will be too high. That's really not true. Now, in the old mechanism, there's no legal framework, And under the old mechanism, the intermediary has to pay $500 of administrative fees. Under the new mechanism, there is no fee. So in that sense, we offer lower cost. And also, the clause 92 is about commission and co-broking, their restrictions. Now, what the provision means is that the IA can issue guidelines in respect of regulation, and some examples are given. These examples are based on guidelines already issued by the 3 self-regulatory organizations. So the IA merely is able to issue guidelines, that's all. And finally, I'd like to thank the industry for offering the valuable views in the process.
Just now, some mention was made about the procedures, the number of days that will be allowed, and so on. We'll be more than happy to take it up with the industry, and where possible, we'll be willing to modify it in accordance with the views from the trade. We have to hand over the room to another meeting. Well, can the information be passed on to us later? Well, just now, we said that well, there is no further requirement for an exam after 3 years, but then under the existing mechanism, after the license has expired, they will also have to get a renewal. So under the arrangement, they will have to apply for a license again. It doesn't mean that they will have to take another examination. Well, that's the best. All right, you request to speak, but then unfortunately we cannot accommodate that because with many deputations and individuals who are here, we'd like to thank them for coming today to comment on the Insurance Amendment Bill. Thank you very much. And I hope that both the administration and the industry will continue to engage in a dialogue. And as far as possible, they can come up with a good piece of legislation. And the next meeting will be held on the 30th of June, 2:30. Another meeting to be held in July on the 14th is a Monday at 6:30. So that's the meeting after next. All right, without further ado, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.